This episode of Bronco Week is brought to you guys by our friends at 5 Star Tuning. Use the link in the description below for all of your Bronco customization and tuning needs.
Welcome to the showdown of the decade, maybe even the showdown of the century, because behind me are the two off-road heavyweight beasts. We've got, to my right, the Jeep Wrangler JL. The Wrangler has had the open top 4x4 market to itself for the last 25 years, but not anymore, because this is the long-awaited 2021 Ford Bronco. And this is a Badlands Sasquatch, the most off-road worthy one you can get. That is a Wrangler Rubicon, the most off-road worthy one you can get. So let's compare them, and then at the end, Andre's gonna take over and talk about all the nitty-gritty numbers, and we're gonna find out which one's better. Now let's talk about design. So big differences between the two. If you look at the Jeep, the first thing you notice, how narrow the hood is. The actual engine compartment in a Wrangler is really pretty small. That's because a lot of the width is taken up on the edges by the big monster Fender Flares. So the actual sheet metal portion is pretty narrow. This one is a Rubicon with a sculpted hood. You've got the vents up top here. You've got these little rings. That's to hold down the windshield when you fold it. But it's really apparent when you walk over to the Bronco, especially the Sasquatch, how different these two vehicles are, because this one, it just visually looks more imposing. It's more squared off in a lot of ways. It's, you know, more chunky because the hood extends pretty much all the way to the edge of the vehicle. You do have a fender flare, but it's much smaller than what you'll find on that Wrangler. If we take a look at the headlights, the Bronco has a standard LED headlight. This one is the upgraded design, but every Bronco has a standard LED headlight. The Wrangler, on the other hand, you can get with halogens. So this model has halogens. This model also has the halogen running lights on the sides here. So these light up as you drive along, but on this particular one, they're not LEDs, it's an option. If we move down to the front here, this one has a plastic bumper. A modular steel bumper is available. Big, chunky recovery points in the front here. And if we take a look at the Bronco, you'll also notice recovery points down here. This particular model, Badlands Sasquatch, does have the removable end caps, although you will notice if you get this bumper, right, the big steel bumper, you don't get the fog lights. On the Wrangler, you do get the fog lights. On the Wrangler, recovery points are hooks. On the Bronco, they're actually loops. Now, I'm going to get a little dirty here for a sec, but talk about the suspension setup. The Wrangler uses a solid axle front end suspension setup. And the big advantage of the solid axle is when you're going off-road, you lift one wheel, the other wheel is kind of shoehorned down into the hole of the obstacle. It's meant to keep all four wheels on the ground as much as possible. The Bronco, on the other hand, if you take a look down here, this has an independent front suspension setup. Now, an independent front suspension setup is typically better on the road. It's typically better on like a race course, a high-speed race course, but we're gonna have to get both of them on the road in Colorado side by side to find out which one is actually better. So, as we start to move along the side here, the Bronco has this rather interesting loop. This loop is rated to 150 pounds, and this is for accessories. So if you're running like a surfboard or maybe a canoe off the roof, you can tie it down to the front. The Wrangler doesn't have that. What the Wrangler has instead is the hood catch on the exterior of the vehicle. So you can open up the hood of a Wrangler, you know, without going inside and popping the hood latch. On the Bronco, you have to go in and pop the hood latch. But tires, guys, this is a monster of a difference. So the Wrangler runs about a 33-inch tall tire. This one's a Falcon Wild Peak on this alloy style wheel. The Bronco, though, is available in a 34.4, I think, about a 35-inch tall tire if you get the Sasquatch package. Now, the Sasquatch package is about $7K, and it's available across the board in every Bronco: base, Outer Banks, Badlands, and that gives you the big tires, it gives you the lockers, it gives you the wider fender flares. And speaking of fender flares, these are removable on a Bronco. They're removable on a Wrangler as well, but primarily when you hit a tree is when they remove themselves the most, whereas a Bronco, you can pull it off ahead of time. Both of these models have rock rails, as you see along the bottoms and the sides here. So both of them have rock rails. If we look at the mirrors, pretty substantial difference in the mirrors. Now, the Bronco mirrors are mounted to the body, and the advantage to that is when you remove the doors, the mirrors stay with the vehicle, so you don't have to get accessory mirrors. On the Jeep, however, the mirrors are actually mounted to the door. So if you remove the door, you do have to find a place to store the mirrors. Another big difference, check this out. Frameless windows. Do you see that? Frameless windows. That's a pretty big difference compared to the Wrangler, which has frames. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure which one I like more. The advantage of this is you can roll the window down. The door is smaller, it's storable inside. But it's also a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more techy. So when you open the door, it comes down about ½ inch. Do you see that? Drops down about ½ inch. I'm worried after, you know, countless times in the sand and the mud, that maybe that'll give you issues, but we'll have to wait and see, whereas the Jeep is much more tried and true. So obviously, slightly apples to oranges here because we got a 2-door and a 4-door, but Fender Flares, slightly different design on the two, although you can definitely tell inspiration was fairly similar to both. Now the rear end is also very different on the Wrangler. So the camera comes out the back, out the spare tire, just like actually on the Ford, and then the swing gate opens up like this. But I want to point something out which is rather interesting. On these Wranglers, let's see if I remember how to do this. It's been a while since I've had a soft top Jeep. So that kind of plops out like that. Same thing over here, and then you kind of peel the window back and up. Everything comes falling out, but that's how you get into the trunk of a Wrangler. The window actually pivots upward. Now, if we compare that to the Bronco, pretty different on this vehicle. So, open up the rear gate. It does open wider than the Wrangler, but if I had a soft top, the whole top would actually pivot up. Because it's a hard top, fairly similar design. Now, let's go ahead and hop in the driver's seat of the Jeep and start looking at some of the interior differences. The interior of the Wrangler, quite different than that of the Bronco. Very vertical, very upright. It's worth noting though, the windshield does fold on the Jeep. It does not fold on the Bronco, so you can kind of replicate your 1941 war days if you wanna imagine that in the Jeep. But seats in this one are cloth seats. You can get leather, but they're not power adjustable in the Jeep. And there's also no lumbar controls on the passenger side, which is a bummer. They've always been very firm seats, but I have to say, interior quality in the Jeep is pretty high. Everything you touch is, you know, pretty nice. I like the red across the dash. It breaks up the blackness of the interior. It's got the little vents that swivel around. This one has a 7-inch screen, but you can get an 8.4 if you want larger. Big chunky controls down the middle here. Volume, fan speed, tune, heated seats, heated steering wheel, power windows located here in the middle. And then down here by the shifter are the locker controls. Rear locking diff, front locking diff, sway bar disconnect, and then an off-road mode as well called Off-Road Plus. Steering wheel feels high quality, basic controls, simple gauges in the Wrangler. You're always going to have an analog tach and an analog speedometer in the Jeep, which is not the case in the Ford Bronco. Feel pretty good in here. You know, the Wrangler, whether or not you get the 2 or the 4-door, it's a narrow vehicle. It feels pretty compact, maneuverable, but it can be a little tight if you are a larger person. I am obviously a string bean of a guy, so I fit in here nicely, and I like the narrowness of the feeling, but let's see how it compares to the Ford. Now the Bronco is a pretty different story in here. Everything's square and blocky and chunky. That's fairly similar, but the overall design and layout is quite different. Now one thing I do like right off the bat, this model has the rubberized floors, basically a vinyl floor with the plug. I believe the Wrangler, all Wranglers I think come equipped from the factory with carpet. Let me know in the comment section below. I wish this was an option, but this feels a lot more like a pickup truck. Just initial impression sitting here in the driver's seat. It feels wider, it feels a little bit more spacious, but it feels chunkier, and maybe not in a good way. I mean, I have to get this on the road and drive it, but first thing I'm feeling in here is that this is a much larger feeling vehicle. Maybe it isn't on paper, but certainly you get that impression that this is, you know, more closely related to like a mid-sized truck than the Wrangler, although there's the Gladiator, of course. So, talking about the seats, seats are better in the Ford. They're just better. This one is this cool kind of neoprene material. You can get it in like a cloth and the leather. It's just a better seat. It's softer, it's more supportive, it's more comfortable. You can get it with power adjustment, you can get it with lumbar support on the passenger side, which is a big deal. Now, as we look on the right side of the dash, no oh you know what bar. So Ford has integrated that over here onto the right side of the dash and then down here into the middle of the center console, but not in the middle. Bigger screen available, so standard 8-inch, optional 12-inch in this one. But up here is kind of the big news on the Bronco. So rear locker like the Jeep, front locker like the Jeep, sway bar disconnect in the front like the Jeep. This one's a little different though, turn assist, so it's actually got a function similar to what you'd find in the Land Cruiser 200 series, where when you go around a corner, it'll break that inside wheel and kind of drag the vehicle around a tighter bend. Partial digital instrument cluster, so it's got an analog speedometer. So, pros of the Bronco interior, it does feel more spacious, seats are better, I like the 12-inch screen. Cons, you know, I gotta say, some of the materials don't quite feel as nice as a Jeep, especially down here in the center console. I'm not a huge fan of this central control feeling of a lot of the plastics. Windows are moved down here, which is fine. I mean, all the switchgear feels good, but some of the plastics feel a little bit less high quality in the Jeep. You can't fold the windshield down, but I do like these. So the Jeep offers auxiliary buttons as well, in a slightly different position, but the Ford is up here, and roof switches are just better. Other cool thing is freedom panels on the Jeep, so you can pull out these front two panels. You can also do that on the back of a Bronco. So on like a 4-door hardtop Wrangler, you can only pull out the front panels of the whole roof. On this thing, you can pull out also the rear panels. Let's talk quickly about back seats, and then Andre, bring it away with the numbers. All right, so this is my driving position at 6'1". I've got pretty decent knee room, I have to say. Pretty decent headroom, actually very, very effective headroom. And then if I fold the seats back, let's see, these do recline a little bit in the Bronco. It's still pretty vertical, so both of these vehicles have a fairly vertical back seat, but one of the most interesting things is there's no center pillar here for the actual B pillar. So there's no column, there's no cross member that connects these two ends of the sports bar, which is interesting to me because on the Jeep, that's where they put their speakers. And that's what kind of makes a radio sound good in a Jeep, is that they're right above your head. But on the Bronco, you got speakers in the front, speakers all the way back here mounted on the back of the sports bar, kind of like on a boat actually, very kind of similar design, but nothing kind of right central. And from initial impressions, I gotta say, the audio quality is not quite as high in the Bronco as a Jeep, even with the premium sound system, but we'll have to explore more with that when I have some more time. Let's see how the seats fold as well. So there's a lever back here, pull the lever, headrest will pop down like that, and then it folds more or less flat, but let's check that out in the trunk. Glass folds up. You can see there is a small hump. It's not quite a total fold flat system when compared to some other vehicles. We'll see how that works in the Jeep, but lots of room, tons of storage. I like this grippy rubber material, some lighting back here. Those are those kind of like boat style speakers I was telling you about up there on the roll bars. So I've borrowed this black Sahara Wrangler. It's not a Rubicon, but it will be a good demonstration of the rear seat. So first of all, I would say maybe as much, if not more, rear seat legroom in my driving position than the Bronco. You can see pretty good headroom. These are the speakers we were talking about right above your head. They're both pretty vertical, to be honest. Both the back seat cushions are quite vertical, but let's see how it folds in the Jeep. Folds on down like that, and then let's do a trunk examination. Now if we open up the rear gate here, similar setup. The gate doesn't quite open up as far. I do like this on the Wrangler. This is nice. So you can see with the seats folded, much less of a jump up here when the seats fold down. So it's more of a much full flat system. You don't have those like boat style speakers on the rear, although you do have the Alpine kicker back here. Tie down points similar to the Bronco. And then both vehicles have the spare tire mounted on the gate. It's pretty cool. You can put a 35 on the Bronco without it, you know, sagging and creating issues.
Well, now let's dig into the numbers and look under the hood first. On the Bronco, you have a choice of two engines. Right here, we have a 2.3 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, which can be had actually with a 7-speed manual or a 10-speed automatic. If you're using premium octane fuel, you can get up to 300 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque. If you're not using premium, the horsepower and torque numbers go a little bit lower. You can also get a 2.7 liter twin-turbo V6, basically very similar engine that's in the F-150 as well. 330 horsepower and 415 pound-feet of torque with a 10-speed automatic. This particular Rubicon has a 2-liter straight-forward turbo engine. The power rating is 270 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque, so a little bit less than in this 2.3. But if you want power options, the Jeep Wrangler is king of power choices. It also has a 3.6 liter gas V6. It has a hybrid. It has a diesel V6. And it has finally that big 392 6.4 liter Hemi V8 underneath a hood. So yes, both of them offer a manual transmission choice, in this case a V6, and it's a straight 4, and also automatic transmission here, and of course auto there. Of course, Ford with the Bronco benchmarked the Jeep and tried to improve on every spec. So let's look at the approach angles and of course ground clearances. In this Bronco right here, I'm going to be talking about maximum clearances available only. It's about 43.3 degrees of approach and about 44 degrees on that Jeep. So as far as approach angle is concerned, it's kind of a tie. If you look at the departure angle in the back, they're about a tie as well at about 37 degrees. But the breakover angle in the center, here's where the Bronco improves over the Wrangler with about 26.3 degrees. That's very impressive, especially for a 4-door. Like Tommy said, the Bronco also offers a 35-inch tall tire, which means, especially in the Sasquatch package right here, it has better ground clearance, about 11.5 inches of ground clearance versus 10.8 on the Rubicon Jeep. And water fording is also better in the Ford, about 33.5 inches of water fording depth, and it's about 30 inches in the Jeep. When it comes to payload and towing, the Jeep and the Ford are kind of tied, although the Ford has an upper hand slightly. In a 2-door Bronco, that one can tow 3,500 pounds. A 2-door Jeep can only tow about 2,000. With 4-door models, both can tow 3,500 pounds. And the payload on the Ford is actually better a little bit model to model. So it has a little bit more capability there. One more important note for off-roading, we have to look at curb weight because a lighter vehicle is always a little bit better off-road, or at least it feels better. And base to base and loaded to loaded, the Ford Bronco is around 300 pounds heavier than a comparable Wrangler. Of course, it can differ with options, but Ford actually offers more safety equipment, more airbags, and some other features that make it a little bit heavier, so it's a trade-off. And of course, we have to talk about price. Base to base. So if you take a Sport Wrangler and a base Bronco 2-door, the Bronco is actually $400 less expensive, about $28,500 to start before destination charges. But then of course prices vary wildly. The first edition Bronco can go up to about $61,000 or above, and of course the fully loaded Hemi Wrangler can be over 70 grand. So you have to pick and choose exactly what options you want.
All right, so which one is better? Well, we have to get both of these out on the trail, back in Colorado, spend a week thrashing them off-road and on-road to really find out which one is the true king. Ford flew us down here to Austin and provided us the Bronco and the comparable Jeep, full disclosure there. But I just can't wait to get both of them on the trail. They both have the pros and the cons. The Jeep, you can get a Hemi. I mean, you can get, you know, massive 6.4 liter V8s, but the Bronco, you can get 35 from the factory, and you currently can't get that on the Jeep. But is Jeep gonna change that? Are they gonna come out with something even crazier, a more capable Rubicon? Guys, I mean, this is such an exciting time to be a car enthusiast. One thing is for sure, competition makes everybody better. As always, this has been Tommy and Andre with the Fast Lane Car. Thank you so much for staying tuned to Bronco Week. This has been a ton of fun, and check out TFLcar.com for the latest and greatest in new car reviews.